My title is, Should the State Take a Stand on First Things? The Dilemma of Theocracy versus Relativism. It's reflections on C.S. Lewis's essay, First and Second Things. One of the very best journals in the world, First Things, named itself after one of the best essays of one of the best writers of modern times, C.S. Lewis's First and Second Things. This little article of his, I am convinced, is the single most important thing he ever wrote on the subject of politics. The point of that article is in the title. And the point of the title is that putting first things first, not second, and second things second, not first, is the only way ever to get second things as well as first things. And the article applies this general principle to the relation between a civilization and the summum bonum, or greatest good, and thus indirectly to the relation between politics and religion. Only a few religious issues are more controversial and important today than that one, and I think no political issue today is more controversial and important than that one. Our dilemma seems to be between a state that does not claim to know or take a public official stand on the question of what is the first thing, what is the summum bonum, the greatest good, the ultimate meaning and end of human life, and a state that does. Since this seems to be an essentially religious question, the first kind of state could be called a secular state, and the second kind a sort of theocracy or ecclesiocracy in a very broad sense. Or, since you could say the question is a philosophical question, you could call it a philosophocracy, like Plato's Republic. Most of us, even Plato lovers like myself, would very much not want to live in Plato's Republic or under Islamic Sharia law. We live in a state and a civilization that has moved from the religious option to the secular one. And both our country and, more broadly, our whole modern Western civilization does not any longer put itself and its secular second things second to any absolute, any first thing, any answer to the question, what is the first thing? What is the end? What is the summum bonum? Although I think Lewis, too, would hate to live under either Plato's Republic or Sharia law, even a Christian one, yet Lewis clearly thinks that this secularism, this neutrality, this deliberate ignorance of first things is a disastrous mistake. His essay begins with a 1942 news item. The Nazis chose as their national hero Hagen, the dark and crafty dwarf in the Nibelung myth, rather than Siegfried, the noble and moral one. Lewis saw in this an example of the principle of first and second things. There is an ambiguity in Lewis's point here, for it is not clear to me anyway whether he ranks art higher or lower than politics. Is his point that the Nazis ranked art too low or too high? Too low, it seems, for when the Nazis subordinated the first thing of their great myth to the second thing of their low politics, they got the myth itself all wrong. Politicized art is always perverted art. But then Lewis criticizes the modern view of art for art's sake and says that the Nazis perverted their art by ranking it too high, by idolizing it, and thus misunderstanding it. But whether this confusion is Lewis's or more likely mine, it does not undermine his general principle, and that's all I want to talk about here. This talk is not about art in any case. Lewis states his principle in these words: every preference of a small good to a great one, or a partial good to a total good, always involves the loss of the small or partial good for which the sacrifice was made. You can't ever get second things by putting them first. You can only get them by putting them second. And you can only get page 3 by looking through the pile and hoping that my computer didn't play this game on me that it usually plays. Ah, here it is. Obvious examples of this principles are addiction to anything: alcohol, sex, pets, shopping. and of course any form of idolatry. Behind this principle, there is an implicit worldview. It holds true if and only if goods are, first of all, not just subjective feelings and preferences, but objectively real, and second, are not just randomly related, but organically and hierarchically related, subordinated to each other in a teleological chain, the lesser designed to serve the greater, as means serve ends. If you break that chain of design, all the links fall separate to the floor. So the philosophical presupposition or implicit worldview here is the worldview of all pre-modern cultures. It is a pre-scientific and unscientific, but not anti-scientific worldview. Science cannot prove it, but science cannot disprove it either. This worldview is implicitly religious in affirming some cosmic design and intelligence that antedates human intelligence, surrounds it, and judges it. In this worldview, matter is relative to spirit instead of spirit being relative to matter. The material cosmos is explained by intelligence instead of intelligence being explained by the material cosmos. The material structure of the universe, the human body, and the experiences of human life are traced back to a cosmic intelligence as its first cause, instead of tracing human intelligence back to material causes like biological evolution and neurophysiology as its first cause. Then comes Lewis's political application of the principle to our own civilization. He writes, "It is impossible in this context not to inquire what our own civilization has been putting first. And the answer is plain. It has been putting itself first. To preserve civilization has been our great aim. Peace, a high economic standard of life, hygiene, transport, science, and amusement, all these, which are what we usually mean by civilization, have been our ends." And this, Lewis insists, is precisely our civilization's great danger. For civilization itself is a second thing compared with the ultimate good. But our civilization is distinguished from all previous civilizations by not even asking, much less answering, the ultimate question of first things. So Lewis asks, was civilization ever seriously endangered until civilization became the exclusive aim of civilization? I do not wish to idealize past ages. Our ancestors were cruel, lecherous, greedy, and stupid, like ourselves. But while they cared for other things more than for civilization, and they cared at different times for all sorts of things, for the will of God, for glory, for personal honor, for doctrinal purity, for justice, was civilization then in serious danger of disappearing? His conclusion is my starting point in this essay. If it were true that civilization will never be safe till it is put second, that immediately raises the question, second to what? What is the first thing? The only reply I can offer here is that if we do not know, then the first and only truly practical thing is to set about finding out. And how do we do that? Well, I think we should at least try to clarify the question first, if we're disciples of Socrates.